We are going to re-look at all of our rankings over the next 2 weeks, and we're going to kick it off today with our 2025 quarterback rankings with tiers. How's it going, Matt? Excited to talk about some quarterbacks?
I'm doing good, man. Very excited.
Starting in the S tier with our number one quarterback. Not a huge shock. This hasn't changed. Josh Allen. Hard to argue with him as the number one quarterback when he's finished first or second for the last 5 years. So we're going to stick there.
Number two, we've got Lamar Jackson coming off the QB1 last year. Some would say snubbed for the MVP. Had an incredible season, 41 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Obviously did what he does on the ground. Not a lot of changes in this offense. Obviously brought in D-Hop, but at this point in his career, might be pretty washed. So all else kind of remains the same in Baltimore, and should expect big things from Lamar again.
And the third guy in this tier, in his own little sub-mini tier, so we put him a little bit over further to the right, is Jayden Daniels. Obviously excellent rookie campaign, finished 5th at the position. I think his pass attempts could go up, and that could help raise his floor even higher. And he can run the ball with the best of them. So really like Jayden Daniels. So what do you think of this tier overall? Then we got 3 guys up in this S tier.
Yeah, I think, with Allen, just the fact that he's finished QB1 or QB2 like every year since 2020, I think just kind of leaning on that consistency. Obviously, if somebody wants to put Lamar over him, just based on his upside, have no issues with that. And really the only reason that I kind of have Daniels, or we have Daniels in this mini tier, is just the longevity. Like, we've only seen him do this for 1 year versus the history that the other guys have. But, I will say with Daniels, the Commanders have done a lot to bolster this offense. They added left tackle Laramie Tunsil, they added Deebo Samuel, they added the tackle out of Oregon in the first round pick, even Jalen Lane in the 4th round wide receiver, who's kind of a burner that can kind of maybe open things up over the middle. So all signs are pointing up, but just, again, kind of in his own little mini tier because we've only seen it for 1 year.
Yeah, and I agree with that on Daniels, obviously. And the discussion between Allen and Lamar, I think, is interesting. And in one quarterback leagues, you might go with Lamar, a little bit bigger swing there because he does have a little bit more upside that we saw last year, but the stability of Josh Allen is just hard to argue with. So in Superflex, I'm definitely leaning Allen as the number one quarterback there. Moving on down to the second tier now, we've got Joe Burrow kicking it off, right? And he just had an awesome season. Ton of volume, bad defense, good weapons. None of that really is changing, I don't think, especially if they don't get the Hendrickson signing figured out going into the year. Just expect more of the same from Cincinnati this year. I think they'll be better as a team. I think their record will be better. I do expect that it's going to be a lot more throwing this season.
Number 5, Jalen Hurts. Lucky for him, he survived the tush-push ruling. It was actually a little bit closer than maybe I thought it was going to be, but another impressive year. Obviously, he does it in a much different way, much more rushing touchdowns with the tush-push, but really the passing yardage is never going to even sniff what someone like Joe Burrow is going to have. But, QB8 last year wasn't necessarily the best. He did miss a couple weeks, but he was QB6 in points per game. Really the issue with him is Saquon is so good and the defense is so good as well. And I think the hope is that, the defense maybe takes a natural step back, but I don't know. They've just got so many playmakers. They got Jahad Campbell, of course they did at the end of the first round. Yeah. So we'll see. But again, just a very solid producer year over year.
Yeah. And this one is tough from a ranking perspective because he's just been locked into that top 2 or 3 for the last multiple years now. And then it's like, well, he had no room to regress as a passer, to reduce his volume as a passer. And he goes out and throws it 150 last time. So anyways, I don't know. Hurts is a top 1 to rank. So his volume goes back up at all. He'll probably be right back in the top 5, top 4 discussion, but we haven't fifth. So the floor with the tush push is hard to argue with. Another mini tier, right? And we're going to stay in the A tier, but kind of distinguish between the tiers here because Mahomes at 6 has had a couple down years, but I think, the weapons, the offense, maybe the defense takes a little bit of a step back, although their defense has been excellent. So it's kind of hard to see Spags not having that unit ready to go. But overall, I think, with Bryce coming back and with Worthy going into his second year after showing the ability to get deep and really developed as a player in his first year, I just think that he's set up in a way that we haven't seen since 2022. So I really do think that there's a opportunity here for Mahomes to really take that step back up into the elite tier, and you can get him at a discount here.
For 7, Baker Mayfield. He was the QB4 last year. He was the QB10 the year prior. And I know myself put a little bit too much stock in the fact that he lost Dave Canales. Liam Cohen steps in, obviously runs an elite offense. So I'm taking a little bit less stock in Liam Cohen leaving, even though I don't love that. But again, they've got Evans, they've got Godwin hopefully coming back healthy. They drafted Ibuka. McMillan looked like a really nice player last year. So just kind of weapons look galore. They get to play the Panthers, the Saints, and the Falcons twice, which is always a good thing. And, last year, what was very impressive with Baker is there was a point in the season where like Cade Otton was the number one when all these other guys were missing time. So he's shown that he can really lift everyone up around him. So, this is kind of the first year that we've really, as us and as an industry, really pushed Baker up. So we'll see what happens. But at this point, it's just hard to argue with the situation and his recent success.
Yeah, and this is a major step up from our last rankings video, right? We had him down in B tier, kind of down in the 10, 12 range, and we've both pushed him to 7 in our rankings. So this is a big jump for him, even from earlier in the offseason, just kind of acknowledging what he's done over the last 2 years and kind of giving him his flowers. And you got Ibuka, right? Like you mentioned. So this is just feels like he's set to launch. And the last guy in this tier, and if you want our rankings, we'll drop them in the description down below. Please check those out. They're on Google Sheets. We spent quite a bit of time putting those together, and it helped us build out these tiers. And the last guy in this tier is our only single-digit rank left, right, in our consensus, and that's Jared Goff. So he's his own another little small tier, but in Superflex, we just value the stability so much, right? It's three top 10 finishes in the last 3 years. I know they lost Ben Johnson, but it's an internal hire. We'll talk about that later in the week. And so I very much feel like Goff is so stable and he's in a position to succeed again. Now, whether or not he's quarterback 6 isn't necessarily the point, right? It's that you just don't feel like he's going to be like down in the quarterback 17 or 18, right? The offense is so good, the weapons are so good around him that he's got this stable floor that I think everybody in Superflex realizes at this point, and we're going to rank him accordingly.
Yeah, and one of the surprising things with Goff was he actually had more spike weeks last year than I had initially expected. I think he had like 6 games over 25 fantasy points. And other than that like fluky game where he threw 5 interceptions, his only dud weeks were when they were just so dominant on the ground. So, we'll see with this, this year, I guess looking at the tier as a whole, Mahomes is definitely someone that I'm going to be targeting, just assuming I miss out on kind of the Burrow and Hurts tier as well. I just think with his weapons looking like the best core he's had in quite some time, and hopefully, like you said, the defense taking a step back, I think he's in a prime position to, be over 20 fantasy points per game.
Yeah, and for my draft strategy approach, especially in 10-team leagues, because in 12-team leagues, you might not get a shot at these guys if you have like the 11th or 12th pick. Like all of these guys might go in the first 10 in a 12-team league, but maybe not Goff. So at the turn, maybe you can get Goff. But in a 10-team league, my goal is to try and get one of these first 5 with my second round pick. Like I just really hope you can kind of press the issue into the second round, and one of these 5 guys will fall. Now, whether or not if you have like an early first round or like an early pick, you're at like 101, 102, and Mahomes, Baker, Goff kind of start to fall. I might even push that and try and get them in the 3rd round, so you can get like a Brian Thomas Jr. maybe, or a really good wide receiver, and then try and get your first quarterback at in that 3rd round, right? And obviously, if you're at 101, 102, and you pick one of the quarterbacks, then it's not as big of an issue. But if you decide to wait, trying to get one of those guys in either the late 2nd or early 3rd would be kind of how I would approach the tiers here.
And that's why we stress so much like mock draft. Like see how your teams look with Jamar as the one, with Bijan is the one if you're in a 2 wide receiver league, as Josh Allen is the one. Obviously I'm referring to Superflex, and then where those guys fall at the 2-3 turn.
Yeah, and study your past drafts too. So you study your league mates' tendencies and try and get an idea of who you think will fall and how many players you think roughly will go in those first 25 picks in your 10-team leagues, because that can help you plan how you want to structure your team up top and give you more freedom later in the draft. All right, let's get down into the B tier now. So we've got Brock Purdy kicking it off here. And, he was banged up a little bit last year. He obviously struggled with his weapons. They were on and off the field constantly. Ayuk was out. Like Juwan Jennings kind of stepped up to be that. But I do think Jennings and Pearsall in another year. Debo's out the door, but Ayuk should be coming back healthy at some point early in the year. So I do expect that his touchdowns will increase, and if McCaffrey's healthy, that'll obviously help him too. So, this is kind of a dart throw just because there's so many moving pieces, which I generally don't like to invest in a guy that just has so much changing around his situation. But Purdy's kind of shown over the last 2 years that he can handle it. That he's a back end QB1 and can have some upside in the scoring department because their offense is good.
Next guy up, Caleb Williams. So this is kind of one of the guys that we differ on quite a bit. I have Caleb as my QB8. You have him down at 13. So we're kind of meeting in the middle with these rankings. But, to me, Caleb was the QB16 last year. He had a lot of boom bust weeks. I think he had 7 single-digit fantasy weeks, 5 weeks over 22 points. So we know the ceiling is there. And obviously the offensive environment around him was a complete mess last year. Shane Waldron, Matt Eberflus, that's about as bad as it gets. And so this is really a bet on Ben Johnson for one, and the adding of the playmakers of Luther Burden, Colston Loveland to pair with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. And I think with Caleb, we saw him rush for almost 500 yards last year. And he didn't rush for any touchdowns either. We know Caleb's a big, strong player. Throughout college, he had 27 rush touchdowns over 37 games. Obviously, it's a much different game, but I think that there is definitely something there in that bag. And then when you look at Ben Johnson, it's like, obviously, Detroit was this offensive powerhouse. They had great weapons. He and Goff are much different quarterbacks, but I think he will definitely adapt to Caleb's game. And the thing that Detroit had going for it too was this, incredible run game with Montgomery and Gibbs, and Chicago's not necessarily going to have that luxury. And I think Ben Johnson knows that. So I think he'll really add in a lot of quick hitters for Caleb. So for me, this is just, one of those players that, I've loved, as a USC fan, but really from the moment he took over for Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma. And so he's definitely someone that I'm going to be heavily invested in.
Yeah, I mean, love the player. So hard to argue with Caleb and the new situation. And something you didn't mention too is the offensive line upgrade. I mean, wow, did they go after that? So hopefully he's got a little more time as well to throw.
He needs it.
Next guy up, Dak Prescott. This worked out perfectly because you love Caleb, and that kind of pushed him up, and I love Dak, and that pushed him up for us. I have him at 8, you have him at 17. So this is one of our biggest differentials in terms of player. I just think if he's healthy, he's a top 5 quarterback for fantasy, and it's maybe more like top 8, but he's a QB1 when he's healthy. And I know he didn't play very well in his 8 games last year, but he's got a long track record of when he's healthy. He's been really good all the way since 2019. I mean, even in the year in 2020, he only played 5 games. So, he finished his quarterback 32 in 5 games, but he was on pace for like 5,500 yards that year, or 6,000 yards that year. So it's in there. When he's played a full season, he basically throws for 4,500 yards. And, adding Pickens just opens up the offense even more. So I just really think if we get clean bill of health for him, that he belongs in the top 10. And that's another guy that I'm going to be heavily targeting if he's going to be dropping into the 15 range. I mean, there's just no reason for that in my opinion.
I think my hesitation a little bit is I'm just not confident that this new coaching staff is going to be good. Like, I don't know, like usually when these new coaching regimes come in, it's like all positive vibes. Like we just talked about with Chicago, like we talk about with Jacksonville as well. But I don't know, just everything around the Schottenheimer hire was just a little bit weird. And I don't know, he hasn't called plays since his time in Seattle. He was a little bit more run heavy at that time. So I'm kind of just nitpicking in the fact that Dak's coming off a hamstring tear. So maybe he doesn't run as much. I know he hasn't been running as much at this point in his career, but just kind of those scrambles that he's always been good at picking up first downs on. But like you said, with Pickens, I think that's going to be a big help for CeeDee Lamb too, because there hasn't really been anyone else that the defense has had to pay attention to. And now, you're going to have to bring a safety in and have a guy on the boundary covering him. That's going to open up a lot for CeeDee. Next guy up, Drake Maye. So another one of my favorite players this year. I have him as my QB9. And we've talked about this with Maye before. He averaged almost 17 fantasy points per game since he took over as the starter. He ran for over 400 yards during that stretch. And again, Patriots were a mess last year. The offensive line was a mess. They signed Morgan Moses. They drafted Will Campbell, number 4 overall. They brought in Stephon Diggs. They added much needed speed to this offense when drafting Travion Henderson. I think Kyle Williams has a chance to be a nice player. Obviously, Vrabel hopefully will help with his development. I don't know, man. I just think he's going to be a superstar. He's such a great athlete. He's an elite scrambler. He does all of these things well that we saw in a small sample size. So again, with Caleb, I've got these guys back to back and have very high hopes for him this year.
Yeah, another guy that we're split on. So this is like the 3 guys right in a row.
Yeah.
Where in our consensus ranks, they're very close, but in our individual ranks, they're not. So we might have to dedicate a video to this tier, or to these 3 players specifically.
Yeah.
All right, next guy up, Jordan Love. And so he didn't play very well down the stretch last year, but I think after his MCL injury, and then Jaden Reed got hurt, who was kind of his best receiver, and then Watson was hurt at the end of the year. It was just kind of a natural progression to lean into Josh Jacobs, and he was running the ball so well. He was scoring a lot. They were able to win games with that setup. So I think that was the reason for why he had such a down year last year. But we saw the year before that when he had a ton of volume, that he was very effective. He still threw for 25 touchdowns last year after coming off a 32 touchdown year. And I think with the addition of Matthew Golden, like they finally went out and got a first-round wide receiver. And so I think there's the opportunity here for Golden and Dobbs to play on the outside with Reed in the slot and Kraft at tight end, and they have their offensive system kind of set up now with that pick. And then they have gadget player that they picked in the 3rd round, Savion Williams, who I know you really like, and you had to be thrilled with that draft capital. So maybe he gets on the field, in certain setups to help keep the defenses guessing, and that could set up Love even maybe for some additional success. So I really think he's a good player. This is somebody that we're pretty aligned on. I have him 11th, you have him 15th, so it's like pretty close. And so I do think Love, especially if you haven't picked a quarterback yet and you're down in this range and some of these guys are gone, Love is a good player, I think, to target for stability as your QB1, somebody that is going to start, somebody that is a good player. And I don't necessarily mind having Love as my number 1, especially if you wait in 10-team leagues to like the 5th round and he's there. I think that could be a good way to start your team. You can kind of count on building your draft around him in the 5th round.
Yeah, I really like Love. I just hope he cleans up his interceptions a little bit. 11 back-to-back years can be kind of annoying, but really love the talent. And obviously that injury really capped his rushing. Next player up, unfortunately, one of my least favorite players in the NFL in Bo Nix. I wanted to push him down further, but I just couldn't do it. I mean, he was the QB7 last year. He was the QB5 from week 8 on. He rushed for over 400 yards, and there was that stretch in the middle of the season where he didn't really rush at all. Now they added RJ Harvey to this offense, Pat Bryant, who I don't love, but we'll see what happens. Evan Ingram in free agency, and they've got an excellent offensive line. So my only, I guess, cold take with Bo Nix is just I just think he overplayed or played at his ceiling his first year. He obviously played a ton in college, and I don't see necessarily the room for growth and improvement like I do with guys like Caleb Williams and Drake Maye. But, who am I to say that? I think he can have an excellent year. He's just not someone that I'm going to end up with because people are going to have him a lot higher than I am.
Yeah, you and I are going to end up with no Bo Nix because
it's funny because you
gets ranked at like 8.
I always think that you love Bo Nix because you just don't like him, or you like him more than I do.
A lot more than you. Yeah. But like I still have him ranked at 12 in our consensus. We have him at 14, right? Like we're going to be getting no Bo Nix because you see these other rankings that are like having it 7 or 8. And in one quarterback leagues, I don't mind that, right? If his efficiency gets better with better weapons, right? And they add an RJ Harvey who should help pass catching out of the backfield. They add Pat Bryant, who should be a nice complement to Cortland Sutton. Hopefully, is like an 80% on the field type of player opposite him, right? And they add Evan Ingram, who's way better at tight end than they've had, right? So they got the quarterback. They added weaponry. I can see it. It's just like you said, if this is the ceiling, it's just leaves so much room for downside. And he didn't even throw for 4,000 yards either, right? I mean, he's got the 567 you can see on the screen right now, and it's just like
and some of his throws are just
increase
bad
much.
too. Like he has more bad throw other than like Anthony Richardson. Like he has a lot of bad throws.
Yeah, and it's not like his rushing was efficient either, right? It would be one thing if it's like Drake Maye, who's up at 7.5 an attempt. He's at 4.6 an attempt, so it's like he scrambles a little bit, but it's not like he's this great scrambler or anything. So anyways, we still like him for fantasy, right? We still have him ranked as like a mid-tier QB2. It's just there's going to be a lot of people that have him as a mid-tier to back-end tier QB1. Next guy in this tier is Justin Herbert, and it pains me to have Bo Nix above Justin Herbert. So in our next ranking video, we might have to switch that. I might have to rank Herbert high enough to get him above Bo Nix, because I do have Nix ranked.
And I have Herbert a spot higher just because I had to, but go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So I need to get with the program. But, with Herbert, he finished QB12 last year after everybody was worried that he wasn't going to throw enough to matter. And that was never going to be the case, right? I mean, obviously they had to get the run game established. They had to get the offense in place. They had a week 5 bye, which I think helped them, right? So they tried really hard to run the ball as much as possible. They had that week 5 bye, and then they kind of let Herbert open it up after. Well, having Ladd as their main target, I think really helped their passing game too, because Herbert was awesome with Ladd. And I think that is going to be more of the identity, even though they add Hampton to the fold. I think that their running game is going to be more efficient. I think the offense is going to be better overall. And I do think that Herbert's floor is basically QB12, which is why I think I need to move him up. So, and the 3 interceptions, I mean, it's insane to me that he threw 3 interceptions all year and then 4 interceptions in their playoff game. It's like, dude, like what are we doing here? Come on, dude. But anyways, I digress on that point, and I think Herbert is going to be better this year.
It was funny. I checked with Herbert. We had him ranked QB12 last year in our final rankings, and he ended up QB12.
Yep. Yeah. And that's again, it's one of those things where with Superflex, when you're looking at it through a Superflex lens, it's more important to pick good players, the guys are going to start, the guys that are going to be out there, the guys that are just like, the best players in position. It matters a lot more versus in one quarterback leagues, you don't really want the 12 quarterback, right? You're taking shots at, Anthony Richardson or shots at Jayden Daniels, which that one worked out, right? But those were the type of guys filling the 10 to 14 range in one quarterback leagues. But, having Herbert up there, I think was a pretty good call for us. Last guy in this tier now.
Yeah, Kyler Murray. So this is kind of not only the last guy in this tier, but kind of a big break after this as far as how we have our ranking set. And I don't know, Kyler, to me, I texted you this before, he was kind of the most annoying player to rank. Like he was QB10 last year, but it was so like boom bust, and he like just didn't look good as a passer sometimes. Like he said he feels like he has to run more in 2025, and I wouldn't say the inconsistencies were like all his fault. Like the team wants to be run heavy and they want to take shots down the field, which can lead to kind of a high variance for a fantasy quarterback. But really the hope is that he and Marvin Harrison Jr. get on the same page. But I don't know, like they didn't design any plays for Marv last year, which I think is just ridiculous. Like I guess they're just kind of viewing as this like 1980s X receiver down the boundary. And if it connects, it connects. If not, so be it. Again, like Trey McBride feeds in this offense, which is great for McBride's fantasy, but Kyler racking up 110 yards and 10 catches to McBride, and obviously no touchdowns because it's McBride doesn't really do a whole lot. So you're really kind of just hoping you hit on those weeks where he scores a 40-yard touchdown with his legs. Otherwise, it feels like a letdown.
Yeah, which he did 5 times, right? And that's how he kind of got into that top 10 at quarterback.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't improve as a passer, and like I have to believe that Marv is going to be used differently this year. And,
right?
Marv didn't have a terrible rookie
year.
Fine. It was just boom or bust. It felt like for fantasy because he either had a monster game where he caught a long touchdown, or had a couple long receptions,
Couple
or it was
multi-touchdown game. Yeah, I mean,
or it was just kind of nothing. I mean, even I don't know. I had him and I put him out there in week 1, dude, and he had like one catch for 2 yards, and I'm just like, what did I do?
then he went off week 2, but and then we were all
Yeah,
like, "Oh, wheels up! This is it!" And
yeah.
then
This is the breakout. Yeah, and
yeah,
it just was kind of like that all year. So I really hope that Kyler can improve his downfield passing, because that's the other thing too. Is he was 34 out of 34 qualified quarterbacks at throws 20 plus yards off the field, and it's just like that's where Marv was operating, and it's just really hard
yeah,
when your top player is strong in one area outside, but your quarterback does not match that skill set. So I hope they have a better scheme. Like you said, for the tier overall, this is a major drop, right? So we kind of did the separate sub tiers up top, because after the B tier, we have in our consensus rankings at 13 and a half for both Herbert and Kyler, and it drops to 16 and then drops to 18 with the next two guys. So it really falls off after this. So in your Superflex leagues, especially 10 team, because in 12 team, it might be a little bit harder to do. But in your 10 team leagues, if you can get two of the players on this screen right now, that is definitely your draft goal. You want to make sure that you're not waiting until and if you miss, right, wait until round 8, 9, 10 to get your second. Make sure that your roster's all filled up, maybe a bench spot, so your overall roster is strong, and then you can get one of these other quarterbacks. But up until round 5, maybe 6, if you can get one of these guys, I think that's or if you can get a second one of these guys, I definitely think that's worth it this year. The first guy here, Justin Fields, obviously he is going to be very controversial in the quarterback rankings, right? Because in one quarterback leagues, he's going to fly up this board. I mean, he's probably going to be ranked 10 or 9, just because with the rushing upside, it's so high. And if he's going to start all year, it's hard to argue with that.
yeah. And last year I picked him up in our Superflex lead, and he was doing well. He had a couple really big spike weeks, but it never it always made me very nervous every time I was watching him play. Like, he just looked very hesitant as a passer, and I don't know. Hopefully, the reconnection with Garrett Wilson changes that. But I think, unlike someone like Anthony Richardson, I do think his job is safe, just because Tyrod Taylor is the backup. And what's kind of the point of that? I mean, they're either going to be losing with Fields and be in a position for a high draft pick, or they're going to be winning with Fields and he's going to stay on the field. Next up, CJ Stroud, man. What a fall from grace as to where we had him ranked last year. And I think, maybe it wasn't fair to push him up to QB5, QB6 range last year, like was the industry consensus, considering he was QB11 his rookie season. And I think a lot of the disappointment, or him being viewed as a disappointment, kind of stems from that fantasy perspective. Like, he had back-to-back years where he won a first-round playoff game in blowout fashion. And obviously injuries at the wide receiver position were really tough for him last year. They traded away Laramie Tunsil, which, was kind of a head scratcher, but they did a nice job in the draft of adding Jayden Higgins and Jalen Noel, teammates out of Iowa State who we both really like. They've got a new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, who was the passing game coordinator for the Rams last year. So we love, the McVay tree. And, last year they were really bad in the red zone. I think they were 28th in red zone touchdown success rate. So hopefully we get some positive regression. But I think with Stroud, again, at least we know he's a really good player. So versus like a Justin Fields, who maybe the jury's still out. But again, just there's so many good guys that, Stroud kind of gets buried a little bit.
Yeah, and it's just tough to bet on somebody that we don't think at this point right now has 45, 46, 4,700 yard upside and doesn't run at all. Right. So it's like this weird thing where it's like he could be Goff, right? Like, that's the ceiling, but then he's got to take a major step forward in order to get there. So I really hope we see it soon, because I do really like the player. Like you said, multiple, like from an NFL perspective, right? Multiple playoff wins already in his young career. So really
multiple blowout wins. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we have another mini sub tier here. These guys that we're going to start talking about are now ranked 20th or later in our consensus rankings at the quarterback position. So we're going to start that off with Tua Tagovailoa, and I definitely like Tua better than you, but that's mainly just because his per game numbers are just better than he's going to get ranked, better than he's going to produce, because he just struggles so badly with the injuries, right? And it's just such a risk with the concussion aspect, and how he's had so many of those. And, it's just turned the offense even a little bit to have to be tailored around the fact that he needs to get the ball out faster. We saw that with a lot more throws to H. Jonnu, a lot less deep shots to Reek, and basically rendered Waddle, kind of out of the offense, fourth option last year. So I do kind of hope that they go back to a little bit more downfield throwing, but I don't have a ton of hope that that's going to be going to be like a staple of the offense anymore. So we could see on a per game basis, though, that he hasn't really finished outside the top 13 or 14 quarterbacks per game. So, if he is out there 17 games, he's going to finish a lot better than this. It's just the risk of injury.
Yeah, and he's only finished one full season, so it is tricky to rank him. Next up, we've got JJ McCarthy. So we spent some time talking about him in a breakouts episode that we did last week, but really with McCarthy, this is, like you said, is just a bet on the system and a bet on the weapons. I think your quote was, if Darnold can do it, so can McCarthy. They should have one of the best offensive lines in the league. We know who his playmakers are. We know who his coach is. So he's someone that we have quite a bit of hope for, even though we weren't necessarily as high on him as a prospect coming in.
Next guy up is his former teammate, Sam Darnold. So, I really like Darnold, and it's really kind of interesting to me that we see him down at quarterback 28 right now in rankings. And it's like, we're right back where we were last year. Right. And we're going to have to pump him up or something, or we don't think the offense is as good, or all that type of stuff. So I don't know. And I intentionally cut off his player card for the year that he started in a good offense, and was QB9. So, let's just forget about
start fresh
before last year, wipe the slate clean. He was on the Jets, dude. I mean, who doesn't want their Jets kind of wiped from their slate,
That's fair.
But I don't know. It's one of these things where if you miss on anybody from the B tier as your second quarterback, or if you wait to the B tier to take your first quarterback, and again, like I was saying, wait until 8, 9, 10 in your 10-team leagues, and Darnold is there. It's just one of those things where it's it just feels like he might be really good again. They brought in new system in Seattle, and they brought him in. He was their guy, and I know he might have Milroe breathing down his neck a little bit, but I don't think Milroe is ready to play. So, and they just gave Darnold a bunch of money. I don't think that he's going to, I wouldn't be buying into that personally. All that news that's coming out about Milroe. I still think it's Darnold. I still think for sure for redraft for this year, it's going to be Darnold the whole year, and that he could have quite a bit of success in this offense. So I'm still in on Darnold. I don't have any problem with him as my second quarterback. So I definitely think if you decide to load up early on receivers and running backs, and say you take a Drake Maye as your first quarterback and Darnold's there in round 9, I don't have any problem going that route at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm a little bit less optimistic than you are. Obviously, I love Darnold, but I will say, it's definitely a downgrade at the offensive line. And, we've seen with Darnold in the past, when things get shaky, the wheels can fall off quickly. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but he's definitely someone that I'm viewing more as like a QB3 in Superflex. Next up, the ultimate boom bust is Anthony Richardson. I would say if we knew he was going to start 17 games, he would be a lot higher than this. He's a much riskier pick in Superflex than in standard one quarterback leagues. I would definitely say take a shot on him in one QB leagues and just grab a Stafford or Tua or whomever from the wire, because his upside is much higher than anyone else you'll see in this tier. So he's just very tough. And obviously last year we all got a little bit crazy chasing the Dragons, so he's a little bit more appropriately ranked this year.
Yeah, and it doesn't change the fact that he had a bunch of games over 20 points. So when he does get it going, and again, I've been consistent on him that if he can just keep his passing together enough to stay on the field where he doesn't get benched and they're not just getting blown out, that, he can still ascend past even the B tier into that A tier, which is kind of where he was last year. But unfortunately here he's buried. And like you said, you can grab a Stafford later, but that's even in Superflex, right? In your one quarterback leagues, right? You could get Goff in round 7 or 8 or 9. And then Richardson could be your last round pick. And if he hits, then you just throw him in over Goff and you'll end up with a good quarterback. So I still like Richardson. Last guy in this tier is the aforementioned Stafford. So, I mean, at this point in his career, he's not going to be a world beater, I don't think. They did add Adams to the offense. They got Terrence Ferguson in round 2 to kind of bolster the tight end position. But overall, I mean, I think we know exactly what Stafford is, right? He's the safety quarterback at this range. So if you're still looking for a starter, I would definitely draft Stafford ahead of Richardson in a Superflex league if I'm looking for a starter. But if you're looking for a third quarterback, I don't know, especially if you have some safety at that third quarterback position or a second quarterback position. Not somebody that I'm necessarily like going heavy after or anything like that. If he falls to me in a good spot, then that's fine. But if not, I'm kind of good either way on Stafford. Very lukewarm here.
Kicking off the next tier, we've got Trevor Lawrence. So I will say this is probably the biggest discrepancy that Trevor and I have. I have him as QB 19. I believe you have him as QB 28. And I will say, for someone such as yourself that is in love with Brian Thomas Jr. and someone who absolutely loves Travis Hunter as well, like something's got to give, because I know you like Liam Cohen as well. But I will say with Lawrence here, like, if it's not this year, then when is it ever going to be? Because he's got 2 insane playmakers. He's got the new offensive minded head coach. Obviously, BTJ is coming into year 2. But, he hasn't necessarily been as bad as maybe we want to think, like QB8 finish, QB13 finish. And, Jags were last in the league in offensive plays per game. Tampa Bay was 9th. So hopefully they can get a little bit more plays out of him. So we'll see. I think this is the best environment that he's ever had, but I'd love to hear maybe why you hate him so much.
Yeah, I just don't necessarily know if he's good, and I think he can support. I think he can support 2 weapons, especially as concentrated as we expect the offense to be in those 2 players. And you can have downfield shots and load up 2 targets and have 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. So like, or just like fumble it away a couple times after getting sacked for the millionth time. So I don't know. I just guess I kind of hold a grudge a little bit about the playoff game against the Chargers, but also like I kind of hold a grudge about he was supposed to be this generational prospect, and everybody still thinks he's that, and he got this $50 million deal based on being that when he hasn't done enough in the league, in my opinion. Obviously they thought so, but I think I'm going to have to break by the time we get closer to the year in terms of moving him up because, I don't know. I guess I could put him over Richardson, or Darnold, and I guess I could put him in that sub tier of Fields and Stroud, but like, I don't know. I just like you kind of said, like if you have a guy that you just don't want on your team, like bury him, right? And you won't get him.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I'm treating Lawrence, and I don't want to have him. And I had an opportunity to possibly take him in our Dynasty League startup, and I passed, and then he made it all the way back to the pick before me. And honestly, if he hadn't got picked, I wasn't going to take him. So, I just don't want him. I don't think he's somebody that I want to invest in, despite the top 8 and top 13 finish. I know we have a friend that was really in on him last year, thought he was going to take a step forward. And even last year, I had him buried at like, quarterback 20 or 22 or whatever, like way lower than consensus. Like you said, I like the weapons. So maybe something has to give. Maybe he is a top 15 quarterback, but
that feels like, I mean, the peak feels like 10, right? Like that's why it's difficult. I get that. Right. And there's no reason that Stafford can't finish 10. So I totally understand that. And I think with the generational thing, some of these guys just peak so early. Like I still think his best year was his freshman year when they won the national championship. So we get like so caught up and then we just want to hold on to that. But for whatever reason with him, like we just hold on to that.
Yeah. And I think it was just like because he was so good coming into Clemson, then won national championships and was the first overall pick. Like it's just been so long of him being this discussion point. He was good in college, but like it never really translated, and we don't talk about that. So I don't know, whatever. It kind of feels like Bryce Harper, esque, in terms of talking about him from the time he was literally 4 years old, and like Harper's
had a better career.
Which,
Harper's
well,
at a
obviously, yeah. I just mean like the build up, and like Harper lived up to it, but Lawrence hasn't. So
yeah,
it's like,
yeah. Okay, that's fair.
that's made it hard. But I will say, in Harper's first 3 or 4 years, he didn't really live up to it, and then he broke out and had an MVP season when he hit like 330. So maybe that's coming
Yeah,
for
but
Lawrence. So the
it
Lawrence
was also difficult.
truthers out there.
But Harper was also overshadowed by Trout because Trout was the 25th pick, and he wasn't supposed to. I mean, even though Harper was drafted a year after him, he kind of had to live under that shadow too.
Yeah, because
Yeah, I mean
Trout broke in as a 20-year-old, beat him to the bigs, and then was just literally putting up 10 WAR year over
yeah,
year as
yeah,
Harper was trying to get his footing. And like Harper won the MVP when he was like what 24, 23. So I'm
yeah.
being a little
He did
unfair
just fine.
there. Yeah, yeah.
And he has a ring
Anyways,
too. So
yeah, which is something Trout will never get. Trout might not even get a
no.
playoff win. So.
No.
All right, moving off of baseball now. Let's get back into the rankings video here. This guy in this tier is Michael Penix. I definitely have Penix ranked ahead of Trevor Lawrence. But, we saw some good play over the last 3 weeks from him. He kind of took over as a starter and is expected to step in and be that guy for Atlanta this year. And I think, he showed some good rapport with Drake London, but I don't think there's a lot of rushing upside here. So, he's one of those guys that I don't really know what to do with. Like he was the 8th overall pick in the NFL draft, so we know he's got the talent. He put out some good throws on tape, but again, it's one of those things where we haven't seen it, and it's like, what's the upside here? It's like, is Goff the upside? Is Jordan Love the upside? Like that's not necessarily a guy I'm looking to run out and get when I haven't seen it yet. And I know there's going to be a lot more enthusiasm in the community as a whole for Penix, but I'm just not there.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Like I thought I was a lot higher on him coming into the draft. Obviously, the Falcons kind of showed us that they were as well. But like you mentioned, he ran quite a bit when I used to watch him at Indiana a ton. But I think he tore his ACL twice there, and ever since then he just hasn't really ran, which makes a lot of sense. And so much kind of his hype is built from that Week 18 game where he just went nuclear and Drake London went crazy. And it's like, okay, that was kind of a meaningless game against Carolina. And I think Week 17 and 18 were both overtime games as well. And his touchdown to interception ratio was like 3-3 or something. Yeah. So I'm definitely not there. I don't see the ceiling, and I definitely can see the floor. So not someone that I'm going to be investing in.
Next guy up is Bryce Young.
So he obviously had a very solid finish to the season after getting benched. I think when he got benched, that a lot of us thought that maybe his career was going to be over with the Carolina Panthers, and he really turned things around. And I think the signs are pointing up. You and I both like Dave Canales. They actually have a very solid offensive line. They drafted Tedoroto McMillan, number 8 overall, which I think is a blessing in disguise for Xavier Legette too, who can move around the formation more with McMillan playing that X spot. And he rushed for 250 yards in back-to-back seasons, which definitely elevates his floor a little bit. I will say the rush touchdowns last year was super fluky. He had like 6 of them, and he had 0 the year prior. So don't chase that. But he's someone that, does have some upside, and is only 2 years removed from being the number 1 overall pick. So he's someone I will be targeting, but with caution.
Yeah, and it's wild to be discussing Young as possibly going to be in the same tier with Stroud, Yeah, it seemed like that was so not going to be a thing.
I had Stroud ahead of Bryce Young going in, and you were like, no, Bryce Young's the one. Which you never know how things might turn out, but just need to remind you that every month.
I think that's the point, though, is that, can you imagine this year, Young kind of passing Stroud now? I mean, there's not a good possibility of that, but Young looked pretty good at the end of last year. So, maybe it just took him a little longer to get used to the pace and speed and the size around him, right? Obviously, he's a smaller guy, so he looked pretty good, though. And I think with better weapons around him,
and it's hard
it could be different.
Stroud, obviously, Texans turned it around a lot quicker. He made the playoffs his first year, but in Young situations, like, it's hard to go from winning every game to being part of a losing franchise. You go to Mater Dei, and then you go to Alabama, and then you're thrown into the Carolina Panthers. Like, it's tough, man. It takes time.
Yeah, it does. And I think we're optimistic that he has turned a developmental player, right? Maybe not the last step, right? But he's turned into a player that is not going to get benched this year in a way that, like, we kind of were looking at him even last year, like he could take a step forward with Canales, but there's a situation here where he was awful as a rookie. And so, I think seeing how he handled the benching and seeing his professionalism also gives me an element of like, okay, this guy gets it, right? He understands his role. He understands the position. He understands that he's still learning. And that's something that I think is valuable in a quarterback. So I like him. I really hope he takes a step forward this year. Next guy up is Cam Ward. Obviously a rookie. So, I don't know. It seems we were talking about this before we started recording, how it's interesting that he was like so highly coveted in rookie drafts, and then we have him buried down here in the D tier, at quarterback 25 or whatever it is here at this point. And so I just struggle here. I really struggle here with Cam Ward. I want him to be good, right? And I think he can be. But if he doesn't have this big rushing upside and he's a rookie and they don't necessarily have the best weapons, I really wish they would have drafted somebody before Alec Manor. But they do have the two rookies with Manor and
DK.
And then Restrepo as well. So they did kind of get additional weapons here for him. But I don't know. I just am not super in on Cam Ward in the way that I thought I was going to be at the start of the process.
Yeah, I'm with you. Next guy up, Aaron Rodgers. So, this is dependent on him going to the Steelers. He was QB 15 last year. He showed some flashes that he still had it, but that was with Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson in a system that, basically was his. Now he goes to Arthur Smith's system. He's only got DK Metcalf to throw the ball to, who's obviously a great player, but not a lot of other playmakers around him. They want to run the ball a ton. He is a year older. The wheels could fall off. We don't know what type of shape he's, staying in right now. He's doing his podcast tour. He's doing Aaron Rodgers stuff. So this one scares me a little bit, but, if he's still got something in the tank, you can't deny, at least a decent floor.
Yeah. And I don't think he's signed yet just because I think doesn't want to do the offseason stuff right now with the team, and it's easier excuse. It's like, oh, I'm not under contract yet.
Well, last year he was in Egypt, right, for the mini camp, right? And Garrett Wilson was yelling at him.
Yeah, and it was like this whole thing. So it's like he's not doing that. He's not making that mistake again. You don't have to tell Rodgers twice about
right.
Like, oh, so they're already making a story out of me not being at voluntary OTA. It's like, okay, I'm not going through that again. You guys can do whatever you want. And Steelers, if you're willing to just sign me when I'm ready to come in, that's what I'm going to do. So, and I think that's where we're at too with Rodgers. All right, and then the last guy is Geno in this tier. And I just hate having him buried here because I feel like he's a good floor play. And as your third quarterback, you can get him here. Like, this is awesome. This is somebody I definitely want on my team as a third quarterback. He's going to go this late. And somebody that I think I have to make an adjustment because I have him ranked 30th. And I think I like him the best this year after we're doing this now. So I might have to move him up in a pretty significant way because, I think with Bowers, Besh, and Myers that he's got a pretty good group of pass catchers, and Genty will be working in the passing game out of the backfield. I think we might legitimately have a decent setup and situation with the Raiders. So, top 20 finish, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility at all here for Geno.
Yeah, I think he's kind of the stable QB3 that, especially when you build your team around guys that may have more risk, like let's say a Bo Nix or something like, you know what I mean? Like you just want to add that stability. JJ McCarthy, like you said, Richardson, of course. So really like him. It's always easy to bury him. And then you look at his stats. Oh, he was the QB2 in passing yards last year and has top 20 finishes the last 3 years. It's like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's tricky, but he's someone that I probably will end up with a decent amount of as my third QB just because I can rely on that stability.